Happy Pride Month and happy Throwback Thursday, and welcome to another segment of Junk Drawer Flix. And for this episode of Junk Drawer Flix, we'll not be needing to go inside the junk drawer to pick a movie because we did a poll on this last week. And this week's episode of Junk Drawer Flix will be on Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. The original film, Nightmare on Elm Street, was written and directed by Wes Craven. The film was such a big success, of course they needed a sequel. However, for the sequel of Nightmare on Elm Street, they did not have Wes Craven writing or directing the film, so they got someone else to do it, and they came up with something a little different. In this film, they wanted to shake things up a bit. They didn't want to have Freddy bound to the dream world like he was in the previous film, so this film wanted to ignore the rules that Wes Craven had set up in the previous film. In this film, a new family moves into Nancy's house on Elm Street, and Freddy decides to possess the young teenage boy that lives there. Before we go into the review, I want to talk a little bit about this movie and my history with it. I thought this movie was awesome as a kid. I never understood the hatred that this movie got. I thought this movie was great. As a kid growing up, I was always into transformation scenes. I was into werewolves. I was into metamorphosis scenes. Things like The Fly. Like I said, werewolves. Michael Jackson turning into a werewolf. I was into it. I was always into monsters and things like that. So as a kid growing up and being really into practical effects and loving transformation scenes, I loved this movie. I always stick up for this movie. Even now to this day, this has one of the best transformation scenes. Even though it's not a werewolf scene, it's still a very well done transformation scene, and it's all done practical effects wise. It is still awesome to me to this day. I still stick up for this movie. This is Nightmare on Elm Street 2, so Freddy is still scary. His makeup is still really good. His face is always kept in the dark, and it's still perfectly lit. So it's still pretty awesome. And also, this movie, Freddy Krueger has some of the best and most memorable lines in this movie. Like I said earlier, being a 5-year-old kid in the 80s watching this movie didn't seem that much of a stretch, so I missed all the subplot and all the subtext that was going on. So when Jesse was dancing all funny or whatever, didn't seem that much of a stretch compared to something I would see in Footloose because it was the 80s. Everybody was dancing at any given moment or singing something. So it didn't seem that much of a stretch. It had all the things that 80 movies would have. It had parties. It had kids being wild, and I did not notice anything as far as subtext. So fast forward to my early 20s being in college and taking a humanities course, and we're talking about the film Nightmare on Elm Street 2 and all the subtext. I had seen this movie plenty of times since I was a kid, and I still did not notice all the subtext. I was still into the movie. I was still like, hey, this is still a pretty awesome transformation scene. Freddy is still scary, and this film is still way better than Freddy's Dead. There, I said it. So watching it as a class and dissecting it, the veil was off and my 5-year-old mind was open wide, and I was like, oh, I get it now. After I saw the subtle subtext in the movie and the not so subtle subtext in the movie, I was like, okay, that's fine. Doesn't bother me. I still dig the movie. I don't care. I did notice more, however, when I was taking the course, that a lot of the rules that Wes Craven did set up were kind of broken, and I do kind of see why some people will be like, oh, the rules are broken, yada yada, Freddy shouldn't be crashing a party. However, I'm okay with it. I'd rather him be doing that than Freddy having a daughter that we never heard of until Nightmare on Elm Street 6. I'm cool with all that. As the years have gone on, I didn't realize this movie had a cult following, especially in the gay community. And I was very excited about that because I was like, great, someone else that loves this movie as much as I do. So someone else I could talk to this movie about. So what better time to be talking about Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, starring Robert Englund, Mark Patton. And what better time to talk about it than Pride Month and one of the hottest days of June. So let's chill out and talk about Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. As you can see here, most of the budget's been blown on special effects because they have actor Robert Englund driving a bus in the movie. Take a long look at this image that they're giving Mark Patton, aka Jesse, in this film. This is the look of oh, I'm gonna shoot up this bus right now. Take a long look at this because this is the only time he's going to look like this during this entire movie. That's movie magic for you. One moment you're in Springwood, Ohio. Next minute you're in Palmdale, California. Now I do think the sticker of the Body Glove logo is pretty cool, but what they should have put is, don't forget the Power Glove! Now this movie was made 30 plus years ago, and I will have to say the special effects in this movie is a lot more convincing than the special effects I've been seeing in Fast 9. Yes, and Freddy's still scary in this movie.
Mommy, why can't Jessie wake up like everybody else?
Now I hate to say this, but little sister has a good point here. Now Jesse's looking at his sister very confused because he's like, what? Freddy doesn't have a knife on his thumb in this movie. You must be thinking of Wes Craven's New Nightmare, not Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Now they keep saying there's a lot of homoerotic sexual subtext in this movie. I honestly don't see it.
I need you, Jesse.
There is another scene in this movie I'd like to show that might suggest a subtext. However, I can't show it, not just because of copyright, because of nudity, so I can't even show it. Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, we still get dark and scary Freddy Krueger. We get great practical effects. We get great makeup effects. You can talk about conversations about the subtext or the non-subtext of the movie. You can talk about the great special effects. You can also talk about the locations. You can talk about the overall structure of the movie and just how it's different compared to all the other movies in the series. If you would like to know more about actor Mark Patton, also his journey through his career, and also why he disappeared from the limelight, and also all the subtext involved in the movie, and also the impact that this movie has had on the gay community, definitely check out Scream Queens, which is on the Shudder channel. Hopefully you liked what you saw here. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. I'm Mike the Movie Misfit, and I'll see you at the movies. 320. So if you want to know about
Get more out of life. Go out to a movie.